I mean, you could even throw Bruno Fernandes into that equation, couldn't you, in the sense that is he the right fit for that midfield? But that's another debate. But I think the way that Ruben Amorim plays his midfield, there's going to be issues all along. They're outnumbered every time they play. But you're right, they need a midfielder in. They've looked at Carlos Baleba at Brighton. They can't afford to do that deal. It's too expensive. But United haven't brought any money in this summer. They've let Marcus Rashford go on a loan, but they haven't actually raised any money by getting people out. So to bring people in, they've got to start getting some money through the transfer window. So it's difficult for United because there's obvious issues to address: a goalkeeper, midfielders. The one that could actually happen, I think is very unlikely, is that Al Ittihad in Saudi Arabia have shown an interest in Bruno Fernandes. Right. Now we know that Fernandes turned down a move to Al Hilal at the start of the window, but he's had a couple of poor games for United already this season. He doesn't really fit the system. Maybe Bruno Fernandes might think, do you know what? I said I'd stay in June, but I've seen what it's going to be like for the rest of the season. Maybe it's time to cut my losses and go. But I think that's a very unlikely scenario, but it's a possibility, although it's an unlikely one. But let's be honest, if United suddenly had an offer of £100 million for Bruno Fernandes, would it be the worst thing in the world to take the money and strengthen the midfield and play a system without him? I think it's a debate worth having, because I don't think that Bruno Fernandes right now is making Man United a better team.
But he fits the system if he plays further forward, does he not? Which is where his natural position is, or more natural, not deeper in a central midfield, because he doesn't have the defensive or discipline to do that job. Although I thought what he did in terms of the penalty yesterday was just an absolute joke, over the piece at Man United, he's been the one, not recently, but he's been, if we look at a general sense, he's been the one that's created things for them or done something different. So if you take that out of it, or you don't find a way to push that forward, now that you've got Cunha and Mbemo, who wasn't great, and Šeško, who's probably going to play and should play sooner rather than later to get game time, then where does Fernandes go unless you drop one of those guys? You have to play him deeper. And when you've got three guys up front, or when you've got a system that has basically two attackers behind the striker, you need two guys behind that can do the donkey work.
See,
it's only natural.
If you're Amorim, though, right, you have to make a decision, because the way it is now isn't working, whether it's going forward or whether it's defensively. So if you get an offer for Bruno Fernandes, you take it. You take it, and you make your. You could play Mason Mount in that position, and if you can get a Baleba, a beast, to go and sit in the middle, then it's worth getting rid of Bruno Fernandes. Because as much as we're saying how good he is in terms of what they've got, if he's not producing, then what's the point? You'd be better off making yourself really strong in the middle of the park, then at least you can defend, you don't lose games, and then you build from there. That's what you can do.
If you want to make yourself strong in the middle of the park, if you've got two in there, most other teams, and Marco Silva did it yesterday, they put three in.
Yeah.
And then Cunha had a great first 10, 15 minutes, and then he goes missing, and Mbemo likes to play forward. And so you're always getting outnumbered in there by other coaches that flood the midfield. And this is this system that he plays, and he's steadfast. Now, it worked for him in Portugal, but Portugal is Portugal, right? It isn't as good a league. It's a bit like saying Ange Postecoglou, this style he had at Celtic, which was so open and attacking, he tried to use it at Tottenham, it didn't work. Because it worked in Scotland. Do you know why? Because they're not as good up there. And when you lose the ball and you're open in the Scottish Premier League, you don't get exposed as much because the players are not as good. In the Premier League, he tried it, it worked for a period, and then he got caught out. So what Amorim has done in Portugal and the Portuguese Liga isn't necessarily going to work in the Premier League when you get outnumbered in the middle of the park, which is generally what's happened to them in most games.
Don, of course, you were so positive about Manchester United despite their loss against Arsenal. What went wrong at the weekend?
They disappeared, Dan. I mean, I can't believe we're having this discussion about Bruno Fernandes. I mean, honestly, I couldn't disagree more with the boys. I mean, he ain't the problem at Man United. I mean, Cunha disappeared in the game yesterday, and Mbeumo disappeared in the game yesterday. Šeško had no impact whatsoever when he came on. And the more that game was going on, it was looking like a Fulham win. But I cannot believe Man United in the short term or medium term would get any stronger if they sold Bruno Fernandes and played Mason Mount a bit deeper. I mean,
but
you
Bruno
take so
Fernandes,
much away. You take
Bruno
the assists
Fernandes
away, you take the goals away.
But Bruno Fernandes, you're not going to get that from him if he's playing in a deeper role next to a Casemiro or a Ugarte. You're just not going to get that from him. And by the way, Don, he's never a leader and he's never a captain in a million years. Never.
But Craig, I've sat here since day one, and you look at Man United's midfield, and you could pick Kobbie Mainoo, you could pick Ugarte and Bruno Fernandes as a 3, and you go, that's a good 3. He doesn't play that system. It's half pointless us having this conversation because I knew this system wasn't going to work. I've seen too many teams like Bournemouth, like Newcastle, like Crystal Palace, and loads of others last season tear Man United apart because they play a two-man midfield without any legs. So you could pair any two of the 4 or 5, 6 midfield players that they've got, and whatever combination you come up with, the two of them cannot get around the pitch. They can't move. So he ain't going to change his system, which I think he should, but he won't.
But how come that's why you sell Fernandes. That's the reason you sell Fernandes.
And do what with it?
Bring some players in the middle of the park. There's no point in having Bruno Fernandes if the two guys behind him, number one, can't defend, and number two, can't get him the ball often enough. So what's the point? Why don't you get the money for him and then be solid through the middle of the field, which not only will help the middle of the field, it'll help your back line as well. And then you can start building going forward. Right now, they don't have a good 3. And Bruno Fernandes is in it.
No, but
the other two, it doesn't matter what other two, the players they have, they're not good enough. And the only way you're going to replace them with 2 good players is to use the money from selling somebody, which is Bruno Fernandes.
Hey, Don, listen, Don, you can't sit there.
But just the hypothetical thing is, though, Stevie, if they sold Bruno Fernandes, it's costing 100+ million for Carlos Baleba. So you're replacing a defensive midfield player for Bruno Fernandes. Now, you can argue that makes a little bit of sense because Carlos Baleba is a fantastic player. But who's he going to play with? He's going to play with another one that's got no legs alongside him.
So you do nothing.
You're losing all Bruno Fernandes' goals.
So you do nothing.
Well, no, you keep Bruno. No, you keep Bruno. No, you keep Bruno and you spend more money in January. And you buy a top-class goalkeeper for a start.
Didn't you tell us Man United... Didn't you say Man United were going to get in the top 4? You're sitting here...
I would have preferred... Hang on. I would have preferred keeping Rasmus Højlund for 1 more year and spending a bit of time in the £75 million that they spent on Šeško, buy a £75 million goalkeeper. That might solve half the problems.
Yeah, but hold on a minute. 1 second.
I think we get
Don, you're sitting there saying, "Oh, I told you this won't. I knew this wouldn't work." You were on here
because of the system.
Hold on a minute. You were on here a couple of weeks ago having an argument, but you told us that Man United were looking good, and Dan was wrong, and we're going to get in the top 4.
Dan, he was mentioning all sorts of names. He was mentioning Victor Gyökeres and Buemo, Cunha. He threw all sorts of names at me, and I went, "Yeah, top 6."
Hello, United fans. Today we're talking in this video about the latest news and transfers from Manchester United. Bruno Fernandes has a very tempting offer from Saudi Arabia. The player has been worn out by the fans. It might be time for a farewell to make room for a new player. United urgently needs a big star for the midfield, someone who can take on the leading role. To stay informed about United, just subscribe and leave your like.